What's up, suckers, and welcome to my channel. My name is Joe. You might also know me as Critic or Gamer Critic. And today we're actually going to be talking about something that I've really been thinking about for multiple years. As somebody who's worked in the service industries, multiple service industries for a while, I've dealt with a lot of customers. And so today we're going to be talking about, is it bad customer service or is it a bad customer? A lot of people are bad customers and they never realize it. Some of my favorite stories concerning this actually involve my sister, of all people, who used to work in a restaurant, and so she thought that entitled her to making strange requests at every restaurant we went to. It's not even a joke. So I've got a sister, her name's Amy, right? And we would go out to places and she would order, chicken penne pasta, right? Something simple. But then she would just start doing all of these add-ons, and it would just get to the point where I would look at the server because I felt bad for the server for having to remember all this crap. And I'd go, can she just go back into the kitchen and make it herself? I mean, I'm sure the cooks wouldn't mind, you know. And then, God forbid they miss something, one of the multiple add-ons, and then she would complain. And it's like, come on, this isn't even like good. Like, there's nothing about this. And she would always go back to, well, I was a server, and when I was a server we did all of this. And it's like, no, most people don't do that. Most people actually are kind of understanding, and they get it, especially if they've worked in the industry. Like, if you're the kind of person who has never worked in any kind of service industry, I could kind of get it. For the most part, though, I don't. I don't get the disconnect. Uh, yeah. And I've worked everything from retail jobs, to mass production. I'm currently working at a pizzeria, and it's just all over. And it seems like it honestly does feel like it's getting worse. Like, people in general have no clue what they're ordering or what it takes to get their order done. And so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about it again. Is it bad customer service or is it a bad customer? So, what makes it a bad customer service? Well, bad customer service would be somebody who either doesn't listen to you when you're ordering, whether it's food, or if you're going into a store and saying, hey, I need this item, and I don't know what it's called, and so but I need it to do this function and this function and this function. And bad customer service on that level would be, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. Go find somebody else. Instead of saying, you know what, I've never heard of that, but I'm sure that I could find somebody who has. Or getting out your phone and just Googling the question real quick, save both of you some time. So there's a lot of stuff that, can be done and can be misconstrued. Now, in the restaurant industry, if you have an allergy on something, so let's say you're, for example, again, working in a pizzeria, let's say you got celiac disease and you can't have the dough and you can't have anything that has touched the dough, then, at the pizzeria that I work at, we offer a cauliflower crust. It is gluten free, and if you have celiac disease and you can't have anything that has touched it, then we have protocol for that. But if you're just eating keto and you're saying, hey, I don't want, not that you're allergic to any of the ingredients, you just want a cauliflower crust, great. We're not really going to go through all that process because you're not allergic to it. Um, And it's kind of one of those things where, uh, I mean, should we probably do it? Yeah, but let's be very real. If you're not allergic to something and you just don't want to eat it, tough. Like, that's a terrible thing to say, especially because some of you do know where I work. But the very stark reality to this is, um, I've seen people who have complained about, going to like Burger King or McDonald's and saying, "Hey, I don't want tomatoes," and then they get tomatoes, and they're like, "Oh my god, these guys, they, sorry, this is the bad customer part." So we're not going to get to that yet. Um, so bad customer service would be, in this specific instance of, if you've got celiac disease, bad customer service would be that we treat it as if you just don't want a flour crust, right? The reality is, since I know what celiac disease is and I know how all of that works, obviously you've got to clean your slate, uh, use a different ladle because you don't want the one that's already that's been on the flour dough and all that stuff. So then, so again, I've also worked in mass production. So in mass production, your customer is considered to be, uh, I mean, they're the person literally paying you to do the job. Um, so if you are somebody who just doesn't care about your job and you're putting out terrible product and you're not even watching the quality of, so I worked at a printer, for example, and so we would print packaging large for large corporations and stuff. And I've seen my packaging, at Walmart, for example, up for sale. So, we've had large customers, and for the most part, your large customers or your customers in mass production are, again, they're the reason you have the job. So, um, when you don't care about your job and you've got somebody, your customer is paying you to do the job, and you're not making sure that the print quality is good, you're not making sure that your colors are on, that you've got a good screening, which means that the full image is there, uh, and just basically anything else, whether it comes down to die cutting it and making sure that the image is in the right spot when you die cut it, or just any of that stuff. I mean, that's all bad customer service. That's somebody who does not care about their job. They do not care about the customer. They do not care about the customer's experience. That's bad customer service. Um, but let's get to bad customers. Um, because this conversation can go on for a while. Now we're all familiar with the Karens, and I guess the guy version of that is a Kyle. But reality is, um, it's a far wider spread thing than most people even realize. So, some of my own personal experiences on this. Um, I worked at a pawn shop for multiple years, and at this pawn shop, we would have people come in, and when you go to a pawn shop, you're not normally, well, when you go to a pawn shop to either sell or get a loan, most people aren't in the best space of their life, right? Most people, when they're in there, are, they just need some quick cash. They don't really need, um, that they're just in and out. Most of them know the drill. Most of them are perfectly fine with the way things are at the moment. So for the most part, especially working in the pawn industry, most people get it, and most people are fairly respectful about things. You know, they may not be the happiest, but they get it. And then you get some people who feel really entitled to a specific amount of money, regardless of what they have, uh, or I guess they just never know what to expect. Uh, so so I guess I'll get to some of the stories I've got. We had a gentleman come in, and I don't remember what he was needing to get a loan on. I don't remember what. Uh, I really don't remember much about him. What I do remember though is he was getting really. He had something that just didn't have much value to it on the resale side. And if you've never been to a pawn shop, uh, you know most people will tell you that they're just there to screw you and all that stuff, and they're kind of right. Um, the reality is, when you go to a pawn shop and you're looking to sell or get a loan, is that the pawn shop views you as a vendor. You are vending them goods to sell, uh, whether you plan on coming back to get it or not. Which would be the pawn side of things. Uh, you are the vendor. You are selling them something at vendor price. So what they're going to do is they're going to look at what the current value market of something is, if they're buying it immediately, or they're going to look at the current value market and see what the prices have been and what the trend is for that item, and whether or not it's going to hold its value. So in general, when you get a loan on something, they'll pay you less for it because, for example, in the state I live in, uh, it takes a minimum of 4 months for the pawn shop to take ownership of it. And if it's an item that is going to be out of date within 4 months, they're not going to give you very much money for it, because it's hard to tell what the market's going to do. So, uh, we had this guy come in, and he owned a business of some sort, and he was short on payroll. And so he brought an item in that he thought was worth far more than it was. And so I was like, yeah, man, I just can't get there on this. And, like, this is what it's valued at. This is what I can offer you, but we're not anywhere near the amount of money you're asking for. And he started getting very indignant and started talking down to me as if, he was better than me. And I was like, look, man, you're the one who came in here asking for money. Don't sit here and talk down to me because you are in a bad spot. And that's it. Like that's how, I mean, that guy was a bad customer. Not because, I mean, and I get it, like, he was in a bad spot. If I remember right, he wasn't able to make payroll, which is a huge deal. Um, and it wasn't that I wasn't willing to work with him. It was just that he didn't really have anything that was really worth what he needed. And he didn't want to part with the things that were worth what he needed. So it was kind of a catch-22 scenario. He wanted the money, but he didn't want to put anything. He didn't want to put his own stuff up to get the money. Um, and that's actually kind of common. Now there is another story that I've got from the pawn shop, and this one's a really big one. This one isn't dealing with somebody who is buying something. This is with selling something. This is dealing with somebody who is buying something. So we had a gentleman come in, and he was always a jerk. He would always come in, and he would always bring in some old tool that was no longer working, whether he'd broken it or he let air guns sit around, and seals, the seals in the air guns would just erode over time. And so that's actually what this story is about. Is he brought in two nail guns that he'd bought from the store 2 years prior, I was able to look at the serial numbers and find out like when they were last in the store, and we sold them 2 years prior. So he brings them in, and he was like, "Yeah, I need to exchange these. They don't work." And I was like, "Well, you bought them 2 years ago. Of course they don't work." Um, and of course they were used. It was a pawn shop, so it's not like he bought something brand new. And they were. So he was like, "Well, I just want to trade it for something." I'm like, "Look, man, I mean, the manager's not here. The store manager isn't here today. I can't authorize this. I wasn't the manager there, so I definitely couldn't authorize such a transaction like that to begin with, let alone something involving items that were bought 2 years ago." Now, to kind of preface, to go to the very beginning of this story, when I was told that this gentleman was in the store, I went out to talk to him, and at the pawn shop I worked at, you had these little cutouts. So you basically had like your countertop, and then it was so your countertop, and then there was a little dip for people to put their items into, and it was about like 18 inches off the ground, and then it would go back up to the next counter, and then it would dip down to about 18 inches off the ground, and that was set so people could bring in heavy items and put them on the platform, so we could actually look it over, plug it in, test it, make sure it works. So when I went out to deal with this gentleman, to talk to this gentleman, he's sitting in one of those cutouts, and he's got his legs stretched out in front of another customer, and he's got his legs stretched out in front of a woman who is at one of the registers, and his foot is like right in front, like going across her, between her and the register. Like it's immediately that this guy's there to be a jerk. So I go to deal with him, and I'm like, "Look, man, you bought these things 2 years ago. I don't have the the ability to authorize this sale, or to authorize this trade. You know that you have to talk to either the store manager or the general manager for this. Just come back tomorrow. He'll be back tomorrow." And of course, that just wasn't good enough. Mr. High and Mighty had to have his tools traded out today. I don't get it. They sat around his house for 2 years. Whether or not he had, I don't know. What I do know is, he wouldn't take no for an answer, and he just kept getting more belligerent and angrier and more belligerent and angrier. And finally, I can't remember exactly what was like, and he made the comment of, "I spend more money here than you make in a year." And that was it for me. I was done. I looked at him and I said, "I've never seen you spend a single dime here. No, actually, all I've ever seen you do is bring in broken tools and badger the managers until the managers give you what you want. Like all you do is come in and you cry and you whine and you moan and groan." I have to watch my language because it's YouTube. But, and I just went off on him in front of everybody that was in the store. And I basically, I did not mince words. Told him everything that I'd been wanting to tell him for months prior, because he's always a jerk to everybody. Every time he comes in. The reason that I was sent up to deal with him was because the manager on staff that day, because we did have a manager, but it was not the store manager. But the manager on staff that day didn't even want to deal with him, and so I had to. And it got to the point where I had to threaten to call the cops to get him to leave. And all I did was I kept telling him, "Look, come back tomorrow. Come back tomorrow. The managers will kiss your butt. They'll give you everything you want, and you'll be a happy little clam again. Just come back tomorrow." And I definitely made it sure that he knew that I had no respect for him, that I did view him as just a whiny little person, and I was not interested in playing his games. That's a bad customer. Both of those guys, the guy who just wouldn't, who felt entitled to get more money, the guy who felt entitled to get more money without having to actually put something up for it. And then the guy who felt like the world just owes him everything and he should just be able to treat people however he wants. And it's really funny because there's all these stereotypes that go around, especially with pawn shops, that it's just it's for poor people. It's just for the downtrodden, and the reality is, like, the worst people that you'll ever find in a pawn shop is somebody who's rich. They're the most entitled people that you could ever come across, and that's actually a really big deal in most of this. Is the more that people seem to want you to value them, the worse they treat you. So, moving on from the pawn shop, which would be the retail side of things, we're gonna go to some. I remember working in a print shop, and we had one customer that every single time they had a job come in, it was, no matter what, it was considered to be a 24-hour job. It had to be every job that came in from this company had to be out the door 24 hours after they placed it. Every job that came in from this company had to go through multiple manager checks, had to go through multiple system checks. Like, it was just terrible. It was a terrible customer. And they didn't even order that much. The fact that we took orders from them, I'm pretty sure that the only reason we took orders from them is because of all of their ridiculous standards. We were charging them premium. And I'm pretty sure that's the only reason that we took orders from them, was because everything that we did for them had to be special order. Had to. Didn't matter how simple it was. Didn't matter what their customers said. If they ordered it from us, it had to be done. And, it was one of those things that, don't get me wrong, we had the systems in place to make it all happen, but it was a pain in the butt. It slowed down production for anybody who had to deal with them. And that's a bad customer. I mean, do I get why they did it? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they got a few print jobs that were messed up and they were just done. And I don't blame them. I mean, I worked in that place. I saw how people treated some of those jobs. And, those of us who actually cared about our jobs were the ones who would slow down, and we would make sure everything was right. And, but we weren't, but because we weren't fast, it didn't matter the fact that we had almost no redos to our name. Like, things weren't coming back because we messed them up. So it was just kind of a mixed bag. Like, that's just a world that is really, really difficult to kind of understand sometimes. So now today, working in the restaurant industry, we're seeing a whole lot of other stuff happening. To the extent that people will order something without realizing what they're ordering, and we do our best to, at the place that I work, we do our best to explain everything. But what we've been dealing with lately is just people making outrageous claims. So, for example, somebody coming into a restaurant, so it's a New York style pizzeria, and somebody going into the New York style pizzeria not realizing that New York style pizza is thin crust. And so they'll order the pizza, sit down, they'll eat it, and then complain that it was thin crust and expect us to do something about it. And it's like, well, we gave you what you ordered. They're like, yeah, well, I really don't like, thin crust pizza. And it's like, well, why did you go to a New York style pizzeria then? And then they're like, well, I didn't know that was the thing. And we're like, well, yeah, that's like, we don't consider Pizza Hut to be competition because they're not New York style pizza. They're pan pizza. It's a completely different style of pizza. So it's kind of one of those things where it's basically like it. So on that level though, it's more of an ignorance. But what makes them a bad customer is that instead of going, oh well, I didn't realize the difference. Sorry about that. Then they'll end up doing is go to like Google or Yelp or something like that. And this is a real thing that actually happened. Was the staff was hardworking, the food was fresh, but I don't like thin crust pizza. 1 star. 1 star, because I don't like thin crust pizza. Or when people are like, oh, well, do you have this in stock? And we're like, oh, no, we actually sold out. We've been busier than we anticipated. And then they start going, what do you mean you sold out? How can you sell out? You don't make these in-house? And we're like, no, we don't make onion rings in-house. We're not a burger joint. We're a pizzeria. We don't make onion rings in-house. No. So it's kind of one of those things where yeah, and it goes back to what I was talking about with my sister, where she would just order, and people do this too. We have specialty pizzas which are set at a specific price, or you can build your own pizza, and it's X price per topping, right? And so what people will do is they'll say, well, I want this pizza, but I want to sub this for this, and this for this, and this for this, and this for this. And they'll go down the line, and they're basically building a whole nother pizza, but at that, kind of lower price range. And a lot of people might go, well, what's wrong with that? It's already priced out. And it's like, well, that's not, it's because the specialty pizzas are something that we memorize. It's something that when that order comes through, we can just throw the toppings on and it goes right into the oven. We don't have to think about what did the customer want, which toppings did they need, did I get all the toppings that they wanted? When you start doing that stuff, people have to stop and go, okay, so no pepperoni, add ham, no sausage, sub chicken. When you're doing crap like that, it doesn't help. It really doesn't. And if you're the kind of person who does that at a restaurant, and you're like, well, yeah, but I want it this way. Well, I don't care. It's so terrible. It's so terrible. But the reality is, if you want like 1 or 2 items changed out, that's not a problem. But if you are trying to build an entirely separate pizza on the cheap, I mean, piss off. Make it at home. Do everybody a favor, just stay home. And that's the customers that you're going to slow down their orders. That's the people who are working behind the counter that are going to have to deal with you. Honestly, just stay home. So I started telling a story earlier. I saw somebody on Facebook complain one time that they ordered burgers from a fast food joint, and they ordered no tomato, and they had tomato on it. And I can't believe these people want $15 an hour to mess up my order. And so I was like, hey, did you tell them that you were allergic to tomato? And he's like, well, I'm not allergic to tomato. I was like, oh, so you can't just pick them off? And he's like, well, no, you don't understand. And I'm like, no, I do understand. I understand that in your head you don't like tomato, but you left ketchup on it, which means you're not allergic to tomato. And you don't seem to understand that when people are trained to work in the food industry, they're trained, you build this meal like this. You do this, then this, then this, then this. It doesn't matter if it's a hamburger where it's, bun, patty, lettuce, tomato, uh, you know, condiment bun. Like, I don't, whatever it is, or if it's pasta, sauce, seasoning, like, or it doesn't matter. We're in the restaurant industry. You are taught this, then this, then this, then this, then this. Everything is layered. And if you interrupt those layers, it slows down the process. It slows down the cooking process, the preparation process, the serving process. It slows everything down. So if you're the kind of person who goes out and if you're not allergic to, if you're allergic to something, freaking say it. Say you're allergic, because there are protocols in place and that is acceptable. But if you are the kind of person who's like, well, I just don't like onions, can you make your sauce without onion? No, we can't make our sauce without onion. Most places don't make their own sauce. Some places, when they do make their own sauce, especially if they're using something like onion is one of the first ingredients that you put in because it releases water. It's a thing, okay? If you don't know the cooking process, then just stay home and learn it. Like, oh my God. And it's the same thing if you're just going to be a difficult customer in general, stay home and shop online. Don't bother us. Like, if you can't be a decent person, or if you're the kind of person who goes out and every time you go out, you get bad customer service, chances are you're just a bad customer. Chances are you're probably just a terrible person, honestly, who only thinks of themselves and who thinks absolutely nothing of the person who's doing the work for you. Like, especially if you're again, working in the restaurant, especially if you're the kind of person who will call in a massive order with no warning. So if we've got to cook 14 pizzas because you didn't plan ahead your lunch, and you're calling in 45 minutes before you need 14 pizzas, I mean, can we do it? Absolutely, we can. But it's going to be a scramble. We'll get it done. And if you show up and you're not even courteous enough to tip, yeah, go pound sand. You think we're going to, I mean, we'll do it again because the company needs the money. But, like, just because you didn't dine in doesn't mean we didn't work our asses off for you. There's a big difference. So, sometimes it is bad customer service. Many times it's bad customer service. And many times it's bad customers. So hopefully, and this is a conversation that we need to start having, honestly, just as a society who is very customer service related. You've got to give good customer service, and you've got to be a good customer. And again, if you're the kind of person who every time you go out, you're getting bad customer service, chances are you're just a bad customer. So that's going to be it, guys. Thanks for letting me get on my soapbox on this one. It's been festering for a couple of years. Glad to be here. Glad you're here. I hope you take care of yourself. It's been a rough couple of years, so I really do hope you guys take care of yourselves. So I'll see you later.